The sun was still low when Sam Turner unlocked the garage doors. The building wasn't much to look at, an old service station on the edge of town, its walls lined with faded posters from the 70s and the smell of oil and rubber baked into the concrete. But for Sam, this place had become a lifeline, not just for him, but for dozens of men and women who came here carrying scars the world rarely saw. Sam was a mechanic by trade, but if you asked the veterans who gathered here, they'd call him something else, the guy who gave them back the keys to their lives. It started with one man. 2 years earlier, a veteran named Marcus had come stumbling into the shop. His truck sat useless outside, transmission blown. He'd just landed a warehouse job after months of unemployment, and without that truck, he couldn't get to work. Sam remembered the man's eyes, not desperate exactly, but tired in a way that went beyond sleepless nights. Sam fixed the truck for free. He didn't announce it, didn't make it into some grand gesture. He just handed Marcus the keys and said, "Get back on the road, brother." Marcus's face broke into something Sam hadn't seen in him before, relief mixed with dignity. Word spread. Soon another veteran appeared, then another. Each came with a car that barely ran or a van that needed parts no one thought worth replacing. And each one carried stories. Some had lost houses. Some had lost families. Some still woke up sweating from sand and gunfire. Sam started staying late, using his own paycheck to buy parts. His wife, Ellie, would bring dinner in Tupperware and sit on an overturned bucket while he worked. She worried about the bills, but she also saw what was happening. Men who had been drifting were finding solid ground, even if it was just 4 tires and a tank of gas. By spring, he wasn't working alone. A retired Army sergeant named Carlos showed up one morning with a toolbox. He didn't ask for permission. Just rolled up his sleeves and started pulling apart an alternator like he'd been there forever. Then came Jenna, an Air Force mechanic who'd been struggling to find civilian work. Before long, the garage had become less a shop and more a movement. They called it Back on the Road. At first, it was simple, fix one veteran's car, then another. But Sam noticed something deeper. Each repair wasn't just mechanical, it was personal. Marcus came back weeks later, still employed, a little straighter in his walk. Another man, Daniel, got his minivan running and was able to see his daughter again after months apart. Every ignition that turned over felt like a heartbeat coming back to life. But nothing stayed simple. Parts cost money. Word spread faster than their wallets could stretch. Some nights Sam sat at the kitchen table with receipts spread out, rubbing his temples, wondering how long they could keep this going. Ellie would refill his coffee and tell him, "You'll figure it out. You always do." The breakthrough came one autumn afternoon. A local news crew, tipped off by a veteran's wife, showed up with cameras while Sam and his crew were elbow deep in a rusty Ford. At first, Sam wanted nothing to do with it. He wasn't chasing headlines. But the story aired that evening, and by morning the phone rang off the hook. Donations. Volunteers. Offers of old vehicles. Even kids dropping by with piggy banks cracked open. Still, the garage wasn't just about cars. It became a place to sit, to talk, to unload what soldiers often carried alone. Some vets came by even when their cars were fine, just to hold a wrench and feel useful again. One night, after everyone had gone, Sam sat alone on the shop floor, grease on his hands, staring at the rows of vehicles they'd brought back to life. He thought about his own father, a Vietnam vet who'd never found his footing after coming home. The man had drifted into silence, then into drinking, and finally into an early grave. Sam remembered being 12, sitting on the porch, listening to his mother cry inside. Maybe, Sam whispered to himself, this is what he would have needed. It wasn't long before the program began to stretch across state lines. Carlos reached out to buddies in Texas. Jenna called an old Air Force contact in Colorado. Before Sam realized it, there were satellite garages, small, scrappy operations using the same model: help a veteran, no questions asked, just get them moving again. But growth brought challenges. Some people doubted them, accused Sam of using vets for attention. Others asked why cars, when there were bigger problems like housing or healthcare. Sam never had a polished answer. He only said, a car can be the difference between a job and no job. Between seeing your kid or missing another year. Between being stuck and moving forward. One evening, as autumn settled into winter, Marcus returned. He looked stronger, healthier. He carried a box of donuts under one arm and grinned like a man with good news. Got promoted, he said. Supervisor now. Wouldn't be here without you. Sam clapped him on the back. Nah. You did the work. I just turned a few bolts. But Marcus shook his head. You gave me a start. That's what mattered. That night, after the shop closed, Sam sat with Ellie under the flickering neon sign. She asked him how many they'd helped so far. He pulled out a notebook, pages grease-stained and dog-eared. He counted. 37, he said softly. 37 vets back on the road. Ellie leaned against him. That's 37 families too. Sam didn't reply. He was staring at the notebook, the numbers scrawled in the margins. 37. It was something. But it felt like only the beginning. What he didn't know was how far that beginning would reach or how soon a phone call would change everything. The following weeks turned into something Sam never expected. Every morning before dawn, there'd already be a car parked outside the shop. Sometimes an old pickup with peeling paint. Sometimes a rusted sedan coughing smoke. And sometimes a van packed with everything a family owned because they had nowhere else to go. Each driver had the same look when they walked through the door. A mix of embarrassment and hope. They'd stand there, shuffling their feet, mumbling about how they didn't have much money, how maybe Sam could just take a look. And every time, Sam or Carlos or Jenna would wipe their hands on a rag and say the same words, "Don't worry. We'll figure it out." One man, a Marine named Jeff, brought in a Dodge Caravan that looked like it had barely survived its last deployment. He admitted he'd been living out of it with his 2 kids after a divorce. The transmission was shot, the heater dead. Winter was closing in. Sam could see the shame in Jeff's eyes as he explained. "I don't need charity," Jeff muttered. "Just, if you could tell me what it would cost, I'll try to scrape it together." Sam set down his wrench, leaned against the hood, and looked him square in the eye. "You already paid in ways I can't imagine," he said. "This one's on us." Jeff's throat tightened, and he had to look away. His little girl, maybe 7 years old, was sitting in the corner of the shop coloring in a notebook. When that van finally roared back to life, she clapped her hands like fireworks had gone off. Moments like that kept the team working through the nights. Carlos often stayed until 2 or 3 in the morning, his old knees aching but his hands steady. He told stories while he worked, some funny, some dark. Jenna, younger and sharper with the newer models, teased him about being slow, but she admired him. She knew that staying busy here kept him from sinking back into the loneliness that haunted too many retired soldiers. There were failures too. Some cars came in so far gone that even Sam couldn't save them. He hated those nights, the quiet in the garage after the vet drove away with nothing. He'd stare at the floor, feeling like he'd let someone down, until Ellie would come and rest a hand on his shoulder. "You're not God, Sam," she whispered once. "You're just a man doing his best." But in his heart, he wished his best was always enough. The local news story hadn't just brought donations, it brought skeptics too. One morning, a businessman walked in with a smirk and said, "Nice publicity stunt you've got here. Bet you'll be running for office next." Sam didn't even bother wiping the grease from his hands. He just said, "Pick up a wrench, or pick up your mouth and leave." The man left. For every cynic, though, there were 3 more supporters. A retired couple started bringing boxes of spare parts from their old junkyard. A group of high school students showed up one Saturday offering to wash cars and sweep the floors. Even a food truck parked outside twice a week, handing out free meals to the vets waiting for their vehicles. One evening, Marcus, the first man Sam had helped, stood in the shop doorway, watching all the chaos, sparks flying from a grinder, laughter echoing from the back, engines revving back to life. "You realize what you've done, right?" he asked. Sam shrugged, tightening a bolt. "Fixed some cars." Marcus shook his head. You built a family. That's what this is. Sam didn't answer. But that night, when he finally crawled into bed, Ellie whispered, "He's right, you know." By the end of that year, Sam's little notebook had 64 names written in it. 64 veterans who had walked into that garage broken down and walked out with keys, hope, and a piece of their life back. What Sam didn't write in the notebook was what was coming next. Because somewhere in Washington, D.C., someone had seen that local news clip. Someone had circled the words "back on the road." And before long, a phone would ring in that greasy little garage with a number Sam never imagined seeing. The White House.